Hi, my name is Ken Ham. I'm commander of the STS-132 Space Shuttle Atlantis crew. You're watching NASA TV.
From Launch Complex 39 at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, this is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. We are now about to enter the final 5 hours of the countdown for the launch of Atlantis on mission STS-132. This is the 132nd launch of the Space Shuttle program, the 32nd launch of Space Shuttle Atlantis, and the 34th shuttle flight to the International Space Station. This will be a 12-day mission with the landing at Kennedy Space Center currently planned for May 26th at 8:44 a.m. There are 6 astronauts who will shortly be aboard Atlantis en route to a rendezvous with the International Space Station. There are 3 planned EVAs, or spacewalks, during the mission that will last approximately 6 hours during the 1-week period that Atlantis will be docked with the International Space Station. We're entering the suit-up room now at the astronaut quarters in the Operation Checkout building. Here's our commander, Ken Ham, who has spent 13 days in space aboard Discovery on 124. Here's our pilot, Tony Antonelli. This is his second trip into space, having flown as a pilot on 119 aboard Discovery, which delivered a space station integrated truss segment and a pair of solar generating wings. Going over now to Garrett Reisman, MS-1 aboard Atlantis on STS-132. He'll be performing spacewalks 1 and 3. He holds a PhD in mechanical engineering and spent 3 months in space aboard the International Space Station. And here is Steve Bowen. He's the first ever submarine officer selected by NASA to be an astronaut. He's mission specialist number 3 and will be doing 2 spacewalks, EVAs 1 and 2. This is his second spaceflight, having flown previously on Endeavour. Piers Sellers. This is his 3rd spaceflight, having flown on STS-112 on Atlantis and 121 aboard Discovery. He's logged 41 EVA hours in 6 spacewalks. And Michael Good, making his second trip into space, having served as mission specialist number 2 on this mission. He'll be doing spacewalks on EVAs 2 and 3. He was previously on Atlantis on STS-125, the most recent mission to do maintenance on the Hubble Space Telescope. And here comes our STS-132 Atlantis crew, leaving the suit-up room, headed now for the elevator. And much of the astronaut support personnel in the ONC giving them a goodbye as they leave. And here they come. Kennedy Spacer employees are always invited to wish the crew well as they leave for the launch pad. And they'll be escorted out to the pad by a NASA security van, as is customary, behind them. And there they go. The astronaut now arriving at the pad and going up the incline, going up the ramp to the pad surface. Here are the astronauts now getting off the elevator, ready to cross the orbiter access arm. And our commander, Ken Ham, being assisted with his launch and entry suit prior to boarding Atlantis to be our first crew member aboard today. And here we see our commander being seated in the cockpit. He'll be followed by Mission Specialist number 3, Steve Bowen, in just a moment. And Mission Specialist number 3, Steve Bowen, being assisted with his launch and entry suit. He will be doing 2 spacewalks on STS 132, EVAs 1 and 2. This is his second space flight, having flown previously aboard Endeavour on STS 126 in 2008, where he logged more than 19 hours of EVA time in 3 spacewalks. Joining us now here in firing room 4 is astronaut Ricky Arnold. He is going to be walking us through some of the activities to put the crew members on board. And I wonder, first of all, if you could give us a little bit of your impressions of what it was like to be in that white room and getting on board the shuttle right now. What are your your recollections?
Over a year ago, and good morning. It was just a little over a year ago, and it was a good afternoon. It's something that was very familiar. We actually come down here a month before we launched to kind of do a dress rehearsal of all the activities. So, you know, the people, the faces, and all the procedures are very familiar. The only difference today is it's going to be for real. Get a pretty good view looking down into the cockpit there. You can see all the switches, the overhead switches. Ken Ham is on the right. Tony Antonelli, you can see his American flag on his left shoulder. And Chris Cassidy, the top of his head, he's the astronaut support personnel. And getting in there's a little tricky. You'll notice when they were getting them in there early, you saw Chris being very careful with the guys' heads and helmets, because it'd be really easy to bump one of those switches right overhead.
But I gather if that happens, there's pretty easy to notice in the firing room or somewhere, isn't it?
Absolutely. Someone down here is paying close attention. And you can see Garrett Reisman getting strapped into that in the lower left-hand corner there. He's MS-1 on this mission. And his job really is to keep an eye on Tony, back him up, help him out. We got one of the big milestones prior to launch is the APU pre-start. Garrett will be making sure Tony gets all that right, although Tony will get it all right. And the next last person is Mike Good. He's actually MS2. He'll be the last guy getting strapped in here.
Houston, MS4, come check.
Hey, good morning, Piers. We're just enjoying your accent down here. How do you have us?
Loud and clear, sir.
Right.
Hawk's trying to get a look at something. Got a couple mirrors going on, and yeah, it'd be nice to have a little bit of audio. Maybe it wouldn't right now.
I guess when you can't turn your head, can't move around, a mirror's not a bad thing to have.
Yeah, there's actually some panels Tony has to get a look at on his lower right-hand side. That there's some.
OTC, MS1, come check.
MS1, this is OTC. I have you loud and clear. Good morning, Big G.
Good morning, Mother. Good to hear you.
Glad to have you on board this morning.
Garrett Reisman getting a comm check. Yeah, so there's actually some talkbacks on some switches back behind, right over Tony's right shoulder that he can't really turn his head to see with the helmet on.
MS1, come check.
MS1, this is NTD. I've got you loud and clear. Good morning, Garrett.
Good morning, Jeremy. Good to hear you.
And they'll use these mirrors for taking a look at that.
Houston, MS1, come check.
Hey, good morning, Garrett. We got you loud and clear. How us?
Good morning, Scorch. You're sounding especially handsome this morning.
You're scaring me, dude.
Thank you for using your sexy voice.
And
So,
Mike Good coming into view in the MS2 seat, and Chris Cassidy will start working on him here shortly.
So it's not always the same closeout crew members in the white room from flight to flight. It varies some if
it'll
they're
vary.
assigned to a mission.
Exactly. The guys who actually, the suit technicians, I guess is the word I'm looking for, which is part of the kind of the closeout crew. The suit technicians are basically assigned to the crew, and they'll be working more than one mission at a time. But they're the guys who are coming out to training events whenever we're suited, wearing these orange suits. They'll be there supporting, and they really know the equipment. They kind of know what's worked and what hasn't worked, and they do a really outstanding job getting us ready to fly and making sure we have all the proper equipment we need to get up there safely.
So it looks like they're all aboard now.
Yeah, it sure does. Getting Bueno strapped in, and they're getting some preparations made to the hatch, and looking like a good day.
And attention on the net, this is the NTD performing the launch status checks. Verify ready to resume count and go for launch. OTC.
OTC is go.
TBC. TBC is go. PTC.
PTC is go.
LPS.
LPS is go.
Houston flight.
Houston flight is go.
Mila.
Mila's go.
STM.
STM is go.
Safety console.
Safety consoles go.
SPE.
SCE is go.
LRD.
LRD is go.
SRO.
SRO is go. You have range clear to launch.
And CDR.
Atlantis is go.
I copy all, and Launch Director NTD.
Launch Director.
Yes, sir, at this time, the launch team is ready to proceed.
I copy that, Jeremy. Thank you. KC Chief Processing Engineer, verify no constraints to launch.
No constraints.
Thank you, Steve. Payload Launch Manager.
Mike, for our Russian partners and the rest of the ISS processing team, we'll go.
Copy that. Thanks, Bill. KC Safety and Mission Assurance.
KC Safety and Mission Assurance is go, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Range Weather.
Weather has no constraints for launch, Mike.
Okay. Ops Manager.
Mike, the MMT's in good shape. Shuttle program is go to let you launch Atlantis.
Okay. Copy that. Thank you. Atlantis Launch Director.
Go, sir.
Okay, Hawk, on behalf of all the manufacturing, processing, flight, and launch teams that have worked on Atlantis since March of 1980, I'd like to wish you all good luck, Godspeed, and have a little fun up there.
Thanks, Mike. Those are great words. And like you said, there's 1,000 of folks out there that have taken care of this bird for a long time. Right now, a special thanks to Orbiter for getting us off the pad today. And we're going to take her on our 30-second flight. And if you don't mind, we'll take her out of the barn and make a few more laps around the planet. Nove Rassvet, prihodit na stansiu. Payekli.
Thanks, Hawk. I understood all that. And we'll try to get you out of here on time.
Good, man.
And NTD Launch Director, you are clear to launch Atlantis.
Copy that, Launch Director. The countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. T-minus 9 minutes and counting. GLS auto sequence has been initiated.
The ground launch sequencer, the primary computer here in the firing room, is now in control of the countdown. We'll be checking over 1,000 parameters in the launch sequence for Space Shuttle Atlantis in the next 9 minutes. Beginning now to retract the crew orbiter access arm.
Let's go for orbiter access arm retract.
Atlantis crew, our team has worked hard, and it's with great pride that we send the last crew of Atlantis to the International Space Station with the mini research module to be installed.
Well put.
Teresa Annulus, our orbiter test conductor today from United Space Alliance.
GLS is go for orbiter APU start.
CLT, perform APU start.
APU start, and what?
Preparing now to retract the gaseous oxygen vent arm, the GOX beanie cap, the vent hood.
CLT, OTC, clear caution warning memory, verify no unexpected errors.
That's inward.
Fuel cells going to internal reactants.
OTC, PLT, caution warning clear, no unexpected errors.
Copy. Atlantis, close and lock your visors and initiate O2.
OTC, that is in work.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 0 and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis, reaching the crest of its historic achievements in space.
And Houston, Atlantis is in a roll. Roger, roll.
Houston is now controlling. The roll maneuver is complete. Atlantis is in a heads down position on course for a 51.6 degree, 136 by 36 statute mile orbit. And the 3 main engines on Atlantis have now been throttled down to 72% of rated thrust as the orbiter prepares to pass through the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle in the lower atmosphere. The engine's now beginning to throttle back up.
Atlantis, you are go at throttle up.
Copy, go at throttle up.
All three engines looking really good, back at full throttle now at liftoff. The fully fueled shuttle, boosters, and external tank weighed 4.5 million pounds. It now has burned half of that liftoff weight in propellant. 1 minute, 30 seconds into the flight. All three auxiliary power units that provide hydraulic power to the orbiter's systems in good shape, as are the fuel cells providing electricity to all of the systems on board. Atlantis is already 19 miles in altitude, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 20 miles, traveling 2,500 miles per hour. Coming up on staging, the point at which the twin solid rocket boosters burn out and separate from the orbiter. Booster separation confirmed. The onboard guidance system has done its job of settling out any of the dispersions that have been introduced at the booster separation. Atlantis' performance thus far is exactly as planned as Atlantis heads into orbit, flying heads down, wings level into a historic sunset on its 30-second mission.
Atlantis, you are 2-engine TOW.
Copy, 2-engine TOW.
Atlantis can now reach Zaragoza in Spain in the event of a single-engine failure. However, all three main engines are still operating at full throttle, 104% of rated thrust. The auxiliary power unit's still in great shape, as are the fuel cells. Atlantis is traveling 3,700 miles per hour at an altitude of 47 miles, downrange from the Kennedy Space Center now 88 miles. Atlantis is getting a boost from the orbital maneuvering system engines on the tail of the vehicle. Those have been burning now for about 1.5 minutes.
Atlantis, you are negative return.
Copy, Scorch, negative return.
Negative return means Atlantis can no longer return to the Kennedy Space Center in the event of an engine failure. It's already traveling too high and too fast to return to the launch site.
Atlantis, you are press to MECO and single-engine Zaragoza 104.
Copy, press to MECO, single-engine Zaragoza 104. And Scorch, I got the roll.
Lucky dog. Atlantis, we will have a nominal shutdown on all three. You will be go for the +X, go for the pitch.
Atlantis copies, nominal shutdown, go for the +X, go for the pitch.
Good readback.
That roll to heads up provides a good satellite communications link with Atlantis, continuing its travel into space, approaching 7 minutes into the flight.
Atlantis, you are single-engine press 104.
Copy, single-engine press 104.
Atlantis can reach orbit on one engine now should two fail. However, all three are still in good shape. Atlantis is now traveling 13,000 miles per hour, 580 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center at an altitude of 340,000 feet, or about 64 miles. Shortly, the three main engines will begin throttling back to maintain the structural limits on the orbiter as it approaches loads near 3 times gravity. All quiet here in Mission Control with all systems in great shape. Atlantis is traveling 15,500 miles per hour, approaching 8 minutes into the flight, downrange 740 miles at an altitude of 64 miles, 337,000 feet. Standing by for main engine cutoff confirmation as Atlantis is in excellent shape heading into orbit. Main engine cutoff confirmed, standing by for separation from the external fuel tank. Atlantis now flying away from the external tank after separation. Plus X burn maneuver being performed by Commander Ken Ham.
Nominal MECO, ohms 1, not required. Preliminary ohms to TIG will be 37:30.
We are now getting our first look of the external tank as it drifted away from Space Shuttle Atlantis soon after the shuttle reached orbit after its 8.5-minute ride into space earlier today. As is typical with all Space Shuttle missions, the crew rapidly gets out their handheld camera and takes some still and motion video of the external tank as it drifts away from the shuttle. This gives the ground teams an idea of exactly how the foam on the external tank fared to make sure that all of it stayed in its proper position. You can see some of the cryogenics from inside that tank still venting as the tank separated from Space Shuttle Atlantis. That tank also has what are known as tumble jets installed on it that enable the tank to basically flip end over end to ensure that it actually breaks up as expected. As it goes back down into the Earth's atmosphere, it disintegrates. In this view inside Atlantis' payload bay, you can see the orbital boom sensor system attachment there at the very center of your screen. That's a piece of the equipment that looks like a small antenna that's sticking out is actually the part that the shuttle's robotic arm grabs onto. You can also see the integrated cargo carrier there at the middle of your screen. That's the large cargo pallet that has a bunch of these spare parts that Atlantis is bringing up to the station. On the front side of it there, you can see the spare space-to-ground antenna. Looks like a small satellite dish. On the back side, which is not in this view, but you can see the batteries that are bound for the port truss. Those will be installed on some of the spacewalks planned for this flight. There's some old batteries that will be retrieved and put back onto this cargo pallet and brought back in Atlantis' payload bay. But that entire pallet with all the spare parts located on it currently weighs 8,330 pounds. It'll come back weighing right at 6,000 pounds, a little bit less, but still fairly heavy nonetheless. But all of the spare parts that is coming up on this cargo pallet will ultimately be installed on what is known as external stowage platform number 3. This is exactly what it sounds like, a large stowage platform and pallet that is out on the station's truss. This particular one, ESP3, is out on the left-hand side, the port truss. There is quite a number of spare parts out on the ends of the station's truss structure, so that if those are to ever be needed, they are fairly handy for the crew to go out and get and to install.